If you look at newspaper articles, if you look at websites, if you look at the work of anti-cult activists, there's a tendency to want to present new religious movements as a specific archetype of religion. And this comes from the work of sociologists like Max Weber, who say there are ideal types to describe every, social construction. And so for many people, they want to say any religion that has interesting new teachings is a cult. Although for me, a cult is just a word people put on to describe a religion they don't like. But then there's a tendency to want to say, okay, because a cult is a type of religion, any religion that we call a cult is automatically going to fit this definition. And the rest of the definition is a cult is a religion that is led by a charismatic leader who has some type of psychopathology that leads to sexual abuse and convincing members to commit crimes. And so what I try to say to people is, that you think that when you're describing a group as a cult, that you're honing in on what they're really doing, but in fact, you need to switch your sociological model, that you're not talking about an ideal type, you're talking about a frame. Where a frame is a way of creating a narrative around a movement for the purpose of, in this case, demonization. And so in other words, my resistance to using the word cult comes from the fact that as soon as you call a group a cult, it's a trigger word. And people pick up on they describe a group as a cult because of theology, but then they want to draw a direct line between having a particular theology and an inclination to criminality. And I just want to kind of crack that and say, look, there's no basis in reality for drawing that conclusion, even though right now, because of media, because of bad hostility from people, that seems to be a model that's being very promoted. And what I want people to understand is that model really is more of a strategy for demonization.
That's interesting. I think you've picked up a very important point here that we should really discuss. So the idea is that new religious movements can exist, but people will call them cult, and that would give it that kind of framework that includes many aspects that probably aren't even included in what that new religious movement is doing.
So if you call a group a cult, just if you call a group a cult, the assumption right now is, there's mind control, there's brainwashing, there's manipulation, there's different types of abuse. And the problem is, look, I feel very, very strongly that sexual abuse needs to be eradicated.
Absolutely.
We need to be able to behave ethically. I believe very, very firmly in obeying the law. But the point is that a group will be labeled a cult simply on the basis of their theology, and all of the accusations get dumped on, irrespective of what they're actually doing. And what's cited is, look at these unusual teachings. These teachings are unusual in our society. And so I think it's very unfortunate that, and this has penetrated very, very deeply into the world public. I used to say, just the American public, but now I realize that the cult framing has gone global. It's in Korea, it's in Japan, it's in Europe, it's in the Middle East, it's everywhere. So as soon as you don't like a group, you say, it's a cult. And then many people, because of what they watch on Netflix or what they see on TikTok, or what they see on YouTube, they believe that the correct logical step is to infer, cult, criminal. I feel that that's just very sad.
It's a bit of an extreme way of looking at it, and it's very damaging, absolutely.
New religious movement scholars argue a lot about what is a new religious movement. Is a new religious movement a certain style of religion? My own preference is to regard religions that have been created within the past 100 to 200 years. They're in formation. There are certain developmental processes that happen. There's a first generation, there's a growth. There are questions of what to do after the founders pass away, and people who have not grown up with a founder need to take on the tradition. And so if you use real sociology language, there are questions of routinization of the tradition. And so when I think about a new religious movement, I think about a movement, a tradition that has emerged. For me, my threshold is about 200 years, because I think it takes actually a while for a group to actually really sort of be established and develop. So I go as a matter of time. Some people go as a matter of size. Some people go as a style of religion. But for me, I say a new religious movement is a religion that is new. And then there are certain structural things that happen because it's new. You need to have time for an entire community to determine what version of the doctrines are going to work for them. And you also have questions of persecution, because anytime a religion emerges, this is almost axiomatic. When a religion emerges, it emerges almost always as a critique of the society from which it comes. And that doesn't have to be a harsh critique. It doesn't have to be mean. It doesn't have to be militant, but simply showing up as an alternative, as an implicit threat. And so one of the things to consider with the idea of a new religious movement is they're very often facing persecution by the government. They're very often facing, negative reactions from the rest of the population. And so that feeds into the next term that you were talking about in terms of religious minority, where when we think about countries and societies where there's a dominant tradition, unfortunately, in many cases, the dominant tradition looks at other religions and says, you're a threat, you're disruptive, we need to do something about this. And so if you are a minority, it is very easy to find yourself facing persecution. And so in that sense, being a new religious movement very often invites state surveillance, government persecution, hostility from the rest of the people, and hopefully over time that also maybe can be eased as a process of routinization. And then thirdly, for intentional community, I have been studying, along with new religious movements, communal societies now for, I guess, 30 years. And there are very different models for living cooperatively. Sometimes people share their clothing and they share their toothbrushes. Thankfully, you guys don't share toothbrushes.
No, we don't.
But some people, the division of property, the division of living space, the way whether people have individual choices or whether they all have to eat the same thing at the exact same time, right down to the minute. There are a lot of different possibilities for finding ways for people to live together. But something I'm very aware of is that there's a natural inclination among people to want to live in community, and for some people, it overrides their desire to live independently. And so I look at your community as a community of people who prioritize living together, spending time together, taking care of each other. You share many of your resources, but you share fewer of your own financial resources actually than some other intentional communities, despite the perceptions that people might hold. But I'm interested in the way that you managed to find a community or found a community where people have a certain amount of cooperative economics, definitely shared work. And the kids here, they all know who their parents are. They're very attached to their parents. They live with their parents. But on the other hand, they're very trusting. I'm walking around the other day with Veronica, and there's a little boy who's like, I want to eat dinner with you. I want to eat dinner with you. I want to eat dinner with you. And, so the kids, they really, they have the other adults as their aunts and their uncles. They have friends. And I think that that's actually a very positive thing that's difficult to achieve in modern society. And it's easier to create that type of small culture in an environment like this. There's a sense of attending to everybody in the community, helping people, being egalitarian. I love social settings where those types of values really prevail. And this has been very much that. I feel like I can ask anybody I need for anything. People have been very kind. People have been very helpful. They've attended to things I've asked for help with. And it really inspires a sense of trust, both for me as a researcher and I also can tangibly see for the people who are staying here.
Thank you for those words. And you're absolutely right. I think the sense of family is something we're very proud of, and we really honor that. And it's thanks to the teachings, again, of Abdullah Hashim Abu Sadiq that we are going in that direction for sure as a community.